Social, Cultural and Economic Committee, I tēnei rā. Welcome everybody to today's Social, Cultural and Economic Committee. Feel free to join me in the karakia if you would like. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, te hei mauri ora. Tēnā whakamoeho mai ki au ki tihi kai tohu manapuri rānei mena ka wehi koe ai te hui. Please let me or the Democracy Services advisors know if you intend to leave the meeting. Ai te haura, ai te tītaku karaka 10:30, te kai timo o te ata. Morning tea will be at 10:30 a.m. Are there any apologies, councillors? I've received the apologies from Councillor Brown, Councillor Paul and Pauiwi Liz for lateness. E whakataka koutou amua ai I te Mātinitini. I move the motion that the Kōrau Mātinitini Social, Cultural and Economic Committee accept the apology for Councillors Brown, Paul and Pauiwi Liz. Mā wai tautoko, do I have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Fern. E nai nei ka pōtitia te motini. I now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Please vote accordingly. Ko mana, I declare the motion carried. Conflict of interest declarations. I call on any members to declare any conflicts of interest they may have had in relation to the items on the agenda.
Just to clarify that, as a member of the CHIP board, I have been advised I've got a non-pecuniary conflict of interest. However, not all, that won't apply to all aspects of the decision making, so I may participate in some votes on that paper.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Matthews. Did we need to move that at all? We just note it. Excellent. Cool. Confirmation of minutes. There are
have you got my conflict as well? Sorry.
Yes. Or Liz, were you able to get any advice on what kind of conflict you had?
Yeah, I'm going to, it's non-pecuniary, but I'm going to stand down from the paper.
Okay. Thank you, Pauiwi Liz, and I presume Councillor Brown is the same, so we will just note that.
Thank you.
Microphone.
Find one. Just got a question. If two councillors feel that they're going to stand down from the whole paper and one councillor doesn't think they need to stand down from the whole paper, what does that mean?
Yeah, yes.
The advice is that it's up to us as individuals to make decisions about our conflict of interest, and we've heard from one councillor that is standing down from the whole paper and one who may vote on some matters. We're in a time of transition with the CHIP, and particularly decisions around council's actions rather than matters that will apply to the CHIP. I have been advised that I am able to vote on those if that is my decision.
Yeah, Councillor Matthews is correct. It is up to the member of the committee. Right, moving on to confirmation of minutes. There are no minutes to confirm for this meeting. There are no items not on the agenda, and we have a short and sweet list of public participants. So I would like to first welcome forward Richard Noble to speak on solidarity with the Armenian people. Welcome, Richard.
Kia ora. E te Kōrau Mātinitini, tēnā koutou, e te tumuaki o te hui nei, tēnā koe, e te rangatira a me tori, tēnā koe. So here I am again, and for those of you who weren't here when I addressed the council last year, for some years I have gone to the Ataturk Memorial on Anzac Day to bear a silent, peaceful, respectful witness by displaying an Armenian flag in solidarity with the cause of the Armenian genocide, and also to draw attention to New Zealand government's shameful and expedient unwillingness to recognise this. But last year when I did so, the police informed me that if I displayed the flag, I would be trespassed because Ataturk Memorial is council land and council have given trespass authorisation to the police. The display of the flag, I was told, would cause grave offence to the Turkish embassy delegation. So I came and spoke to the council about that at the time, and that garnered a degree of public interest, including comments from two prominent human rights lawyers who thought it was quite outrageous what had happened, the police action. Subsequently, I have received a copy of the council's ongoing trespass authorisation notice, which makes it clear that police don't have blanket authorisation to trespass people willy-nilly. It says, and you hopefully have a copy of this available digitally, constables must only use these powers in respect of an individual who has breached their implied right to be in the public place, and it is reasonable to do so in the circumstances, while ensuring that the individual's rights and freedoms under the Bill of Rights Act are limited only to the extent reasonably necessary. Now, I think there's an issue here that council need to look at, and it can't just be fobbed off as an operational matter for police on the day. It's your authorisation, it's on your watch. You've instructed the police they must have regards to people's freedom of expression under the Bill of Rights. Human rights lawyers have said that that was overstepped the mark, so I'm challenging you, council, and to review how police exercise that authority, and whether someone holding up a flag, peacefully holding up an Armenian flag, is in fact, if the offence caused to the Turkish embassy outweighs my freedoms, statutory freedoms under the Bill of Rights. I also remind you of the historic solidarity of the people of Wellington with the Armenian people, and I've sent through a copy of a newspaper article in 1922 when an Armenian relief committee was established in our fine city with the mayor of the day, Robert Wright, as its chairperson. 1922, solidarity with the Armenian people. 2022, a decision on under council authorisation that really is complicit in genocide denial. I don't think you can call it anything else. Also, for those councillors who are affiliated with the Green Party, may I draw your attention to the fact that it is the policy of the Green Party of Aotearoa, New Zealand, to recognise the Armenian genocide. And finally, after the events of last year, and it gained some media interest, I was contacted by members of the Armenian community here who were deeply hurt and angry at what happened, and also disgusted that our city has a large public monument to someone who in their collective memory is a genocidal mass murderer. Thank you. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, thank you, Richard. We have time for one pātai from Councillor Winera.
Tēnā koe, thank you for that submission. Whilst not related to anything directly on the agenda today, I think it does bear raising again, so thank you for bringing it to the attention of this committee. I would ask, so why you felt Anzac Day specifically was the appropriate time to raise that very important message, given that it's more a day of Aotearoa's national remembrance than to recall any particular events of European history.
Well, if you look at the article that I submitted as a supporting document, it goes into the whole reason why the events of the Armenian genocide are intimately related with our own national Anzac history. The Armenian genocide is commemorated on the 24th of April, the day before the Gallipoli landings, and the historical consensus is that the rounding up of Armenian leaders in Istanbul on the 24th of April 1915 was a preemptive strike to eliminate the threat of opposition from the ethnic Armenians in the Ottoman Empire, who they felt that the Turkish regime felt that there was a risk that they would rise in rebellion in support of the Allied invasion. So, but I'd commend to you the article that I sent through, and also there's a book called When We Dead Awaken by a New Zealand historian, which is a comprehensive history of the Armenian genocide and how Aotearoa relates to that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I now welcome Sylvia Page to speak on smoking and vaping signage in bus shelters. Now, Sylvia, you have 5 minutes, and we've got a clock just up there if you'd like to leave some time for questions within your 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Madam Chair, councillors and officers. I hate being surrounded by cigarette smoke or clouds of vape. I'm here to plead for large, visible, no smoking and no vaping signs in bus shelters. Wellington Regional Council informed me 14 months ago that the signs were being made. So where are they? Most shelters have no signs, and the few who do, the signs are so minute and tucked away, almost apologetically, on the sides of the shelter. The signage has to be large and visible on entry to the shelter. So where are these signs? It's important to remind ourselves of lung cancer in New Zealand. More than 1,800 deaths a year, 90% of which are due to cigarette smoking. Tobacco smoke contains more than 4,000 chemical compounds, many of which are cancer-causing. This is a serious risk to those exposed to secondhand smoke. Tobacco use is the cause of 1 in 4 cancer deaths. Vaping and e-cigarettes, what are their dangers? Asthma, lung scarring, organ damage, addiction. Can your lungs heal from vaping? It's known that lung scarring is permanent. A recent study found nicotine levels in New Zealand vape liquids can be significantly different from what's on the label. More vape stores are opening. There are presently 869 vape stores. As a frequent public transport user, I have on occasions where a minute sign exists in a shelter politely requested the smoker or vapor to smoke or vape outside the shelter. Always I am met with verbal abuse and threatening behaviour. It's scary. I'm 82. And at night, and if it's raining and blowing, it's me who leaves this to stand outside in the rain, whilst the nicotine puffers remain seated within the confines of the shelter. What concerns me greatly is watching a junior school child pass around a vape to very young children in the shelter. Please, Wellington City Council, take responsibility towards a healthy, smoke-free community. Let's see these large visible signs for no smoking or vaping in shelters as soon as possible. Absolutely, positively, Wellington City Council, you can do this.
Thank you, Sylvia. We just have a partai from Councillor Free, if you would like to answer any questions. It's all right, it's up to you.
Thank you, Sylvia. I have tried to advocate on this one quite a few years ago, but it is Greater Wellington Council that's responsible for putting the notices up. So my question is, have you approached their committee in the way that you've approached us?
I have over 14 months been writing, and my understanding is that each council has some kind of responsibility in this area to do something.
yes, it's complex, but I've been through this before, and they are the ones that actually physically print the notices and put them there. And it is quite influential to come and speak. So I guess my question would be, would you consider doing that? And then we've heard from you, and they've heard from you.
I think they're probably sick of hearing from me in letter form or email or...
Yeah, but it's, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia.
Nobody seems to want to run with it.
No, that's all right. And I'll just give you a confirmation from the chair that we will follow this up with either, if it is Greater Wellington, with our partners, or Kim and I will follow it up personally in-house. And then we will contact you. Thank you. I now welcome Sam French from Wellington Regional Hockey Stadium Trust. Welcome, Sam. You have 10 minutes as you're speaking on behalf of an organisation. Feel free to leave any time for questions within your 10 minutes. Thank you.
Morena, thank you. I don't think I'll be taking 10 minutes this morning. I'm just speaking on behalf of the Wellington Regional Hockey Stadium Trust, which looks after the 6 hockey turfs within the Wellington region. We have our 3 up at the National Hockey Stadium, Berhampore. We have 1 in Fraser Park in Lower Hutt, Maidstone in Upper Hutt, and Elsdon in Porirua. The one within Wellington City Council area is obviously the National Hockey Stadium, which opened in 1985, back when hockey moved from the grass to the artificial turf in the international game. And the pavilion there, which is placed between the 2 turfs, was built shortly after, about the early 90s, I believe. So it's about as old as I am. Basically, the council is supportive of hockey in the region by constantly upgrading our hockey turfs in a regular really in terms of the actual surface. Most recently with the number 2 turf just finished last month, so we thank you very much for that support. In 2017, the new National Hockey Stadium 3 turf was opened, which was majorly supported by council. That was a major operation which has basically made Wellington one of the few areas in the country that has 3 hockey turfs in one place, which makes it able to host major tournaments on the national scale. And you would have seen recently over the last couple of weeks, they have hosted a major tournament on the international scale, the FIH Pro League, which where the New Zealand Women's Black Sticks played against the USA and China. And it was amazing to see the number of community supporters there. The reason I'm here today is because of the application for some funding from the Sportsville Feasibility Fund to look into the feasibility of some sort of work on the National Hockey Pavilion that I mentioned in between the turfs there. That is a council-owned building. The neighbouring building is owned by our trust, which we call the administration building. The main pavilion building has 4 changing rooms downstairs and a viewing cafe area upstairs, along with a kitchen and toilets and such. The administration building has some toilets and storage downstairs, and the Wellington Hockey offices and boardroom are upstairs. In saying that the building is about as old as I am, it is kind of showing its age. I'm not sure whether I can say that within its whole period it hasn't had any major upgrades, but I've been playing at this turf for about 20 years now, and it looks pretty much exactly the same as when I was buying hot chips there 20 years ago. The turf there is in great condition, and it would be great to have the pavilion there in an equally good condition. Basically in terms of the council strategy for having a facility that is fit for purpose. But it was slightly embarrassing, to be honest, to invite international teams to that sort of facility. The changing rooms downstairs would be what I would refer to as Spartan. and the viewing area upstairs, which in terms of the placement and the windows is the envy of a lot of sports, and the ability to watch hockey from there is basically degrading slightly in terms of the interior walls and such. So we're here basically to ask for the funding for the feasibility study, which Wellington Hockey and the Stadium Trust would also be assisting with funding to look into what can be done, what needs to be done to make this an amazing fit-for-purpose facility in Wellington. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Kia ora, thank you. We have two partai. The first one is from Councillor Tenant.
Thank you. I did spend a number of years playing hockey in that place, so it's a great facility. Have you got money to actually do the upgrades, or you need to do a lot of fundraising?
So there are no upgrades planned. There is no budget. That is what this feasibility study will look into.
I appreciate that. I just assume that there will need to be money put if you're saying the facilities aren't fit for purpose. So have you got any funds?
The Trust does save over a number of years. We have spent a lot of that on the new turf in Lower Hutt, so we don't have a lot of funds ourselves currently. Generally, any sort of upgrades to our facilities are a partnership between ourselves, like charity funders, like New Zealand Community Trust and Council. So we do have some funds, but we don't know on what sort of scale any sort of upgrade would be or would be required currently.
So we've got a budget next year, so you'd be looking at a 2027 possibly for when you'd be knowing what you're going to be doing?
It's all unsure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much for your very impassioned presentation, Sam. I think Councillor Tenant has actually answered the questions that I was going to ask about the level of funding that you actually require. So at the moment, there's no estimate, is there?
That's what the feasibility study is for, Councillor.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks for answering those questions. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cool. I would now like to welcome Brett Braunsley. Brett is talking on behalf of the Income-Related Rent Subsidy for All group on item 3.1, chip transition. Welcome, Brett. You also have 10 minutes, and if you'd like to leave any time for questions. Thanks.
Yeah. We've been here before, as you know, but just for the record, we're a tenant-based organisation that has been seeking since October 2022 the IRRS for all, specifically for the city housing's operation. And that has been ongoing, and we've made submissions here before. And I recall Andy Foster's last letter to the Minister on that, in which he requested, quote, immediate relief via the IRRS for current tenants in the event that they had to transfer to a chip. Well, he didn't get it, as we know. And now we are transferring to a chip on our 70% of market rate deal, while new chip tenants will pay 25% of income. Now, despite that setback, I'd just like to inform the Council that we continue to pursue the matter wherever possible. We have 2 petitions before Parliament. We've been granted and made written submissions. We have also been granted an oral hearing, which I'm quite chuffed about. And our primary point there will be that the entire social housing system has a built-in inequity that arises from the fact that some social housing tenants pay one rent, while others pay a substantially lower rent. When one imagines this situation in terms of 2 neighbours side by side in adjacent and identical flats, but on different rent deals, the inequity of the situation is obvious. So we are working to bring about an acceptance that in terms of housing policy, as distinct from practice, this is an untenable situation that needs rectifying. And of course, achieving that rectification is the difficult bit, as we've all found out. Now, we've studied the officer's recommendations and report that you have before you at our meeting last Monday. We were, of course, mindful that the looming transfer to the chip has inevitably created many uncertainties and anxieties in the minds of tenants. We identified 3 matters of concern relating to the transfer of existing tenants. Firstly, the new landlord is a trust board of people unfamiliar to tenants, unlike the council and the city housing staff. Okay? We therefore want to suggest that council urge the new board to call a tenant hui. Get up on the stage, introduce themselves, and be at pains to assure tenants that they have tenants' best interests at heart and will make every possible effort to at least maintain the current rent arrangements, if not improve on them. We think that would be a good PR move. And we think it should happen sooner than later. So, I realise, of course, that the council can't tell the trust what to do, but we can pass on the idea. Okay? Now, secondly, we note that the agenda documents of this and past meetings have nowhere mentioned explicitly what is being done for the many hundreds of people currently on the city housing waiting list. Hasn't been mentioned explicitly. The current proposal, which is in the documents, of making 10% of the CHIP units available for people not on the MSD list is not going to deal with those people adequately because of lower turnover and the size of the list. So what has been done to advise applicants of this current situation and that their proposed landlord will shortly cease to exist? We don't know. We'd like to know, okay, even though they're not tenants. Thirdly, the regulatory authorities' guidelines for CHIP registration include a requirement that the CHIP has an acceptable structure or process for interacting with the tenant body. This could be a tenant organisation or association, an advisory group of tenants, or some other process or structure. No specific arrangement is required other than one that is acceptable to the authority. Now, it may be, with this in mind, that the City Housing newsletter of September last said, it's important your voice be heard, your perspectives are considered, blah, 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 blah. This is why the committee agreed, I don't know what committee, I think it's talking about your committee, that a tenant advisory group should be established. Ooh, we're looking forward to getting this group up and blah, 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 blah. Watch this space. Well, 3 months later, nothing changed, except we have another reiteration of all that. We're finalising the details. The panel will include tenants and other interested representatives. We'll be recruiting for the panel soon, and we'll keep you posted on how you can get involved and blah, 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 blah. Well, it's now 6 months on with all that, and none of us, we are tenants, none of us know what's going on with any of that. And why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem, well, I'll come back to that. In item 6 of the executive summary before you, you have been, it refers to a, quote, a tenant feedback panel, which is currently being established. And item 66 in the executive summary even refers to the mayoral task force report as recommending the, quote, resourcing and support of a tenant association to represent the view of tenants. Well, 6 months on, it's disappointing that we can find no evidence of anything coming of all this. And why is it disappointing? Well, because adequate tenant representation as a body and at a grassroots level is an important contributor both to productive interaction with the social housing landlord and the development of community within the tenant body. And I think I put that as self-evident. And I would add that present councillors may not recall that we had such a situation back some time ago, but I think, with respect if I'm missing anyone, that none of you are familiar with that. Okay, and I'm happy to tell any councillor that's interested how that used to work, because it was extremely effective and we lost it. So, anyway, this is all a moot point, because now that we know the name of the new trust, I understand is, correct me if my pronunciation is wrong, Te Toi Mahana, or is it Mahana, I'm not sure. Moves are afoot to set up the Te Toi Mahana Tenant Association Incorporated. Okay? This will result in elected representatives who can put forward the tenant voice to the trust, resulting in dialogue beneficial to both parties. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Tēnā koe, Brett. Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. And I just want to acknowledge the amount of work that your group has done in feeding into this. I have no signalled partai from any elected members, but we will be canvassing this after morning tea and asking and responding to some of those points with officers if you'd like to stick around for that.
I'm sure there'll be, yes, I understand what you're saying here. That's to come. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Brett.
No questions?
No questions at the moment, but we will have, I'm sure, plenty after morning tea.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, councillors. There are no more public participants on the agenda, but next we have item 2.1, a petition, drone fireworks petition for all public events. Nau mai Callum Best ki te hora ai te kōrero. Please welcome Callum Best, the petitioner, to introduce the petition. Callum, you have 5 minutes to speak to that, and if you'd like to leave some time.
Cool. This should be cool. Kia ora koutou. My name's Ko Callum Takawinua. My name's Callum. This is just on a whim, so I'm really sorry if it seems like not as yeah, I'm sorry, not as polished as other presentations. Cool. So my petition is based around replacing fireworks with drone fireworks for such events as Matariki, New Year's, Diwali, Lunar Festival by. I suppose by the end of 2023, it's presumptuous. It's more just a discussion point to see if there could be a public inquiry into like a voting or maybe just like gauging public interest. So drone fireworks are gaining popularity. As such, we should use drone displays to replace as a replacement for fireworks. This would help mitigate concerns about fireworks-related air pollution, environmental damage, noise pollution, and anxiety trauma to pets. As a capital city, we should follow suit in a progressive, greener way to celebrate. Governments in China and India have already taken measures to prevent fireworks at the Lunar, New Year's, and Diwali, as well as this drones were incorporated into the Tokyo Olympics 2020 opening ceremonies. So kind of examples of. Sorry, I'm speeding through some examples of kind of drones. I'm not too sure if you've seen these before, but just some visual aids. Cool. So breaking down the negatives of the fireworks. So encased in a firework is a cocktail of chemicals and compounds that, when detonated, emit harmful gases, residuals into the air. These include greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, carbon monoxide, and particularly nasty ozone, O3, highly reactive gas compared to the composed of 3 oxygen atoms. So these can contribute to climate change, but also irritate lungs and exacerbate issues like asthma. Amongst other things, these particles include toxic metals such as aluminum or aluminium, barium, lithium, salts. While these metals are useful in giving fireworks bright colors, they also pose a significant risk to health and the environment. This is because during the explosion, these metals are not destroyed. Instead, they are spread far and wide as toxic fog, ending up in the air, water, soil, and can be inhaled and ingested. We don't know the long-term, so the metals are known to cause long-term health problems. Okay, so that's just an example of the chemistry firework pollution breakdowns, but it's not important. Okay, so animal impact. Okay, so as well as metals, other kinds of compounds can also be cause problems. Pericula, right? That word. So they release oxygen, help fuel combustion inside the fireworks, but they can contaminate water supplies, earth, soils, and studies have shown that concentration in nearby water can increase significantly, over 1,000 times the usual value. It can pose a risk to aquatic organisms. Recently, well, not recently, but a couple of years ago, antelope from the Wellington Zoo died from high levels of stress and anxiety due to the fireworks. SPCA team leader Jamie has stated that there's always calls around the fireworks celebration and period. Distressed animals, they've caused horses to go out of control, dogs run and hide. The forest and birds also disorientated and they leave their nesting habitats, especially during the heightened season of nesting, which it kind of tends to fall on. Lots of dead birds. Pros, drones, they don't release greenhouse gases. There's a lower carbon footprint and renewable energy. There's no fire noises or mess. And for ad space or recouping costs, you could also do bidding for private companies to try and purchase rights to display their logos or something like that, helping promote small Wellington businesses or other Wellington businesses, but also recouping costs for the drone displays, which might be something interested.
Cool. Thank you, Callum. We do.
Questions?
Yeah, perfect. Oh, right on time. I was just going to let you know. So we've got two partai, make it quick, Councillor Calvert and then Councillor Pennant.
Thank you. Just two questions. First question is the wind conditions in Wellington.
Yeah.
Second question is, has this been raised sort of at a national level? Because obviously, what does that mean for home fireworks? What does it mean for even 365 days of advertising, that type of thing? So just if you could, I don't know, you can address any of those 2 points.
Okay, so for wind, they can reach up. It's not on the slide, but it was like 21 to it's Wellington weather it can withstand. Obviously, like the more inclement weather, the less likely it is to go ahead. Same with fireworks as well. But the practicality is that they can be moved to different events in different locations. It's hard to move a whole, I guess, like a little boat in the waterfront to like land somewhere where they can be displayed and they won't have a risk of fire. The second question was
just about the national approach. You know, have you dealt with? Are you just talking just to this council, or what about nationally? Because obviously it does there's some broader aspects to all of this.
Yeah, I mean, given the outcry from SPCA and other organisations in regards to people who have private firework displays which cause harm, could cause bushfires. There's like numerous bushfires in other countries and in New Zealand because of fireworks. I think like a fireworks overall ban would be appropriate, given that it's like I guess like explosive devices in the hand of the public, which is like it's fine, but like we don't need to be doing it. It's like it's an opt-in type of celebration as opposed to I guess a right, if you know what I mean. But that's just my personal opinion, so obviously.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Callum. We've run out of time for partai. No, excellent presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
No mai Kim Fell, ki te hora a te kōrero. Please welcome Kim Fell to introduce the report.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. This report relates to a petition that was opened on the 13th of July 2022 seeking support for council to use drone fireworks in place of traditional fireworks. The petition noticed that drones could be used for public events such as New Year's and Diwali. Our city events team deliver a comprehensive year-round program of events that cater to the many different interests in our community. And when planning city events, the team actively looks at opportunities to improve the audience experience. So while balancing again the needs of the community impacts, including environmental and cultural and of course financial considerations. The city events team are looking at the events program currently and are giving consideration to the use of fireworks in general. I'll ask that the petition be received and the report be taken as read. Gisela Carr is the manager of Creative Capital, is available to talk to you or answer any further questions that you may have. So, kia ora, thank you, Chair.
He pātaime utu ai moa e tau patu. Does anyone have any questions before we move on to debate? I've got Councillor Pennant, then Councillor Free.
Yeah, look, I think it's an interesting
Councillor
idea.
Pennant first,
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, and I'm really glad that the public participant came along and raised this issue. First of all, I just read an article which said even the drones can have some impacts on animals. So when this issue is being looked at, I presume we would get some advice. And in fact, the other question was, can we actually have a deadline for when we will get some feedback from officers? Because I think it's really important we're responsive to our community. When they come up with a good idea, I think we need to. And the third question is, I'm just wondering if the fireworks are getting a bit overused. We seem to have quite a lot now. I'm just wondering if there's thinking about doing different things for different communities, but appreciating that some communities might want them all. Kia ora.
Yeah, kia ora. So certainly we'll come back to you as soon as we can with a bit of a summary or report around the use of fireworks. So I don't know, Gisela, do you want to add anything to that at all about?
Yes, kia ora, Council. Yes, anyone in the events business is interested in drones. So the petitioner showed some of the extraordinary work that's being done, but it's not necessarily a solution either on the environmental front or indeed on the cost front. And as Councillor Calvert mentioned, there are, because I looked at this when I was running WOW, I had a discussion with Derek Fry about a drone activation for WOW, for the opening night of WOW, and there are singular aspects to Wellington's climate and the wind that are factors. So we are actually doing a piece of work on this. I think probably end of April is realistic because there's very few companies supplying in the drone space in New Zealand. And so we will consider the factors that are here and come back.
Councillor Free.
Yeah, I think mine's been answered. I was just really interested in the cost.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Chung.
Thank you. Would it be feasible to actually have a trial with the drones to see how they respond and how they display in Wellington, rather than having a decision to switch over to them completely?
Drones have been used. If anyone attended the Kupe experience of the Tawharis New Zealand, Aotearoa New Zealand Festival, there was a drone in activation then. So under clement weather with no wind, that we've seen them in action in Wellington. The question is the one question, which again we just need to go to a sort of an evidence base in this, is really you can't predict what the wind conditions are going to be. The other thing that's worth saying too, and this is just in general about events, is that the thing that the Wellington public really turn out for is this kind of large spectacle. We get our largest numbers on the waterfront in relation to whether it's fireworks or drones or however what technology might deliver it. The big spectacle event is what really draws the crowds, and so that is an important mix of the Council's events program in terms of reach.
Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. A couple of things you've said just sort of gives me a few little concerns. First is, are we out of step with the rest of the country in terms of what is the rest of the country doing around this, which I haven't heard about drones being used. And the other thing is, if we permit drones being used, or we start using drones, what does that say for drones being used across private properties, and what might happen then? Because I think there's some unintended fishhooks in all of this, and how you might address that, and whether you actually have got the capacity to take a look at this, because I think there is a lot of fishhooks. I think it's going to take a little bit of work. I know the organisations.
There will be time for debate on
yeah,
this
but I just want to know from officers, really, if given all the potential fishhooks, do you think that there is capacity to give this the due consideration by April?
Yes, I mean, we're already in discussion on this. So, yes, I think so, an indicative look. And I think capacity will be one of the things we look at. The drones on private property, I mean, that's an issue for the community in general, isn't it? But in this context, it's really drones being used for instance, on the waterfront in a public space. So we're not doing a piece of work that looks at the use of drones in general.
And there are also existing civil aviation rules that sort of outline the compliance of the use of drones. So, yeah.
Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, if I try and rack my brain from when I was doing drone photography, I think it's a 12-kilometre exclusion zone within any airport, so drones are essentially illegal to fly over Wellington unless you've got a commercial permit. My question, though, actually was in terms of the CBD work actually around that permit and working with air traffic control. Has any discussion even started down that permit? Because it's quite a regulated space to have any UAVs flying into airspace.
The piece of work we're doing is really looking at the feasibility of drones in abstract, if you like. And I must say we're agnostic on this because of the reasons that I've outlined. We're simply just doing a piece of work to understand what the issues would be. But yes, totally accept that there's a whole regulatory framework that I mean, we deal with this in fireworks anyway. I mean, obviously no event occurs without a degree of regulation around it, and you're firing fireworks up into the airspace. So it's ground we always cover. I think the question in front of us is drones something we should be looking at. As to whether we're out of step with the rest of the country, I'm not aware yet of having seen the large-scale drone spectaculars that we're seeing in large countries like China present in New Zealand at the moment, but we are talking to the Auckland Council about what their interest is here and what they're doing. So we are, as part of the work, getting a kind of nationwide view, if you like, particularly from New Zealand's biggest city.
Probably to wrap this up, really, we'll bring a report back around drones. Today's resolution is about receiving the petition, so thank you.
Cool. Thank you, councillors. With no more questions, we will move on to debate. Mawai e te motini a whakataka koutou. Is there a mover for the motion? I believe Councillor Abdurrahman is going to move the motion.
I move the paper. I think this is what, when you look at the petition, it's more than 400 people who the community asked us to do it, and it's the right thing to do, and I move the paper.
Fantastic. Mawai whakahounga e tautoko. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tenant.
Yeah, just two things. I'd like to thank the petitioner for raising these issues, particularly given we're trying to be a carbon neutral city. I think it's very appropriate, and also many of us, of course, all of us love animals. But for me, the important thing is the process. That if I did a submission yesterday, it's so depressing having people just blankly staring at you and you're like, I just did lots and lots of work and you do not respond. So I think it's important that when people come here, if we're doing a report, let's say we're doing it. Like, yep, great idea, thank you for doing, because that's quite a lot of work to get all those signatures. So we are doing some work. Similarly, the first submitter, I mean, I'm sure a number of us will follow up, but we really want to be saying we will do something about this, even if it's we won't do anything, but these are for the following reasons. So just as a general rule, it'd be awesome if staff could just put what the action is after receiving the information, and I think that would be really helpful. But, this is great. We'll look at the issue. It's obviously very complex, but a report back would be helpful. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Tenant. Well noted in debate. He taka hei tau patu. Is there any further debate? Fantastic. E te kaikona here, Councillor Abdurrahman, e parangi ana koe ki te whakakoutou, kia koe te tikanga. Councillor Abdurrahman, do you have a right of reply? No? Fantastic. All right, I now put the vote, which has been moved and seconded. Refrain from stealing each other's remotes, you two.
I'm not sure what the motion is.
The motion is to receive the report, receive the information on the petition.
I thought there was an amendment, sorry.
Cool. Thank you all. Ko mana, I declare the motion carried. How much time have we got? All right. Let's crack into the introduction for this next item, and then we will go to morning tea. I'd just like to note and acknowledge the mahi of several staff over the last 48 hours, being able to respond to a lot of our questions. And just note to the committee, I've asked for an officer update on the CHIP to be organised for the committee members. We will also have an upcoming meeting with the chairperson of the CHIP. There will be outreach to tenants in April and May. And we will also have an update on the CHIP from our delegates in councillor-only time. So there will be several more opportunities to receive information around the CHIP and other updates. No mai Kim Whao me te Angelique Jackson, ki te hora ai te kōrero. Please welcome Kim Whao and Angelique Jackson, along with Angela Harford and Bridget Newman from Bell Gully and Jessie Phillips from KPMG to introduce the report. Welcome.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. Look, today's paper is the final set of substantive decisions the Council needs to make about the key agreements that will be in place between the Council and the CHIP. The paper also recommends a name for the Trust. While there's a lot of financial detail in the paper today, we remember that we're establishing the CHIP to ensure that we continue to have a sustainable social housing service in Wellington into the future, and for tenants and for our tenants and for our communities. And it means that we'll be able to build more social housing in the city than we would have otherwise have had the ability to do. These are things that are most important in the driving our work. Today we need the Council to make decisions on three key agreements. The funding agreement, which will cover the terms on which the Council gifts the $10 million of property and the $23 million of cash to the CHIP. As a reminder, these gifts are being given to enable the CHIP to develop a new housing, social housing supply. Item 2 is the lease agreement. The Council's previously taken decisions on most of the aspects of the lease agreement. Today's decisions are just to pick up a final couple of decisions where officers needed to provide further advice to the committee following discussions with the regulator. And as my chair drops even lower, I'll just pull that back out. And number 3 is relationship and reporting agreement. So this agreement sets out the high-level ways in which the CHIP and the Council will work together, and the reporting that the CHIP will provide to the Council. So by way of an update, since the Council last talked about the CHIP in December, the December meeting, in February we achieved a milestone of setting up, is legally establishing the trust jointly between the Council and the founding trustees and the Trust Board. It's now up and running and they are meeting regularly. The Council staff and the Board are working actively on a plan to deliver the operational transition together. And our key focus for both the Board and the staff, and we know it's also for councillors too, is to ensure a very smooth transition for our tenants, maintaining continuity of a high quality service while we work through the change, and as a successful registration process too with the regulator. Officers and the Board Chair will also, this is quite important, will have a joint briefing for councillors on the transition next month. So that's where you can have the ability to talk about operational questions too with the CHIP and with the Board. So, and it's a really good opportunity for councillors to meet the Board and the Chair and to discuss that transition and the Board's priorities too with you. So for today we have Angela Harford here from Bell Gully, and we have Jessie Phillips from KPMG here to answer any questions on the specific detail of the agreements. So back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, councillors. He Pātai Taku, do we have any questions? I know we do. Councillor Calvert, Councillor Free, Councillor Chung. I'm noting all these down.
Thank you. Now, I understand the trust had its first, is it formal meeting or informal meeting a couple of weeks ago? So just wondering whether it would have been useful for us to have had that a briefing from them. I mean, I know they're coming to talk to us, I think it was April, prior to making these more significant decisions. And what was the reason for that time? You know, perhaps you could just help me understand why we're meeting with them after signing this all over.
Right, and so they're still appointing they're in the final stages now of appointing the last 3 trustees. So, and I think it's more about timing at this point around that, and also, having the ability to meet with the chair too in the next while, and the rest of the board collectively when everyone's together is probably the intention there. So, yeah.
Can you? Given what was at the board meeting and understanding it was a board meeting, but we haven't had an opportunity to listen, to hear directly from our 3 nominees on that board. Was there any, probably not decisions, but is there any feedback back to this council that came from that 2-day session with them?
That's probably a question for our delegates.
Well, officers were there, and officers prepared the paper. So I'm just interested to understand was there anything relevant feedback that came from that?
Look, if it's a question for our delegates, you can ask our delegates. But at the moment,
they've all declared conflicts of interest. So I'm just trying to make sure we don't. Okay, all right.
Yeah, maybe you can talk at morning tea. Speaking of, I did say it would be 10:30. Do we have? Councillor Free, do you have a quick question? And then we will go to morning tea.
I don't think it's a particularly quick question because I really want to just understand better the ongoing financial obligations in relation to sort of the properties that we will A, transfer and B, keep and lease. So it's probably not a quick question.
All right. Shall we just take an early morning tea then? Cool. Okay, thank you. And yeah, please do try to resolve and kind of converse with one another over morning tea so that we can have an efficient meeting once we come back from morning tea. We will Right, I'm just going to ask that Angela Harford and Jessie Phillips give a bit more background on the 3 agreements in our paper today, so that we're making a decision based on all the right context. Thank you.
Kia ora. Kia ora koutou, everyone. Thank you for having us here this morning. We thought it would be important to give a bit more context to this particular paper to help with your decision making and your thoughts on it. So, as you will have seen right at the front of the paper, there have been a number of decisions that have already been made by Council in respect of the design and the capitalisation and actually the establishment of the chip. So all of the fundamental decisions have previously been decided by Council. We were asked towards the end of last year to come back to Council on a limited number of points for final decision in terms of the agreements that will be governing the relationship between the chip and the Council. And that is what the content of this paper is aimed at. The trust has been established. It was established on the 16th of February, so it is legally up and running, and we're just waiting on 3 remaining initial trustees to be appointed. And I'd just like to give you the flavour across all of the detail on these resolutions, and that is that in coming up with the design for these options, we have sought to make the arrangements as permissive and flexible as possible for the chip, with the goal of enabling new social housing supply. We want to set this chip up for success and enable it to make social housing better in the city. So that is the goal behind these provisions. But at the end of the day, Council, as a responsible local authority, needs some protection if things go wrong. And so we have that safety net in those circumstances. But otherwise, we really want this chip to be enabled to be successful. So in terms of the 3 agreements, the funding agreement has some key things in it that we've come back to today. The first is about how can the chip borrow against the properties that are gifted to it. Council has some involvement in that. It has to be satisfied with the development plan that the chip will propose when it wants to borrow. And if Council is satisfied, then Council will enable a third-party lender to become first ranking in terms of the security position, and Council will become second ranking security. So it still has a security position at the end of the day. We have some provisions on what the drawdown requirements are when the chip wants to use the $23 million that Council has already agreed to capitalise the chip with. And again, Council gets to see exactly how the chip is proposing to use that money to enable new housing, social housing supply in Wellington. The third key thing that the funding agreement talks about in terms of this paper is how can the chip sell gifted properties, and it might want to do that for, again, development activities, and so we want to enable the chip to do that with some protection for Council but not be hamstrung. And so the proposition is that the chip has to tell Council, you want to be aware that it is doing it. It has to further the charitable purposes set out in the trust deed, and those charitable purposes are all aimed at social housing in Wellington, in a nutshell. Council has to be put in an equivalent security position, so it doesn't lose that protection. And ultimately, Council also has a right to buy out senior debt at the end of the day. And in the trust deed, if things all go terribly wrong, Council gets a right of first refusal over any assets of the chip that are remaining at that point. So there are a number of layers of protection that are really important to be aware of in the context of these arrangements. And finally, the sort of key point in terms of the funding agreement is that the properties and the 23 million are intended to be gifts, i.e. they stay with the chip other than if there is a worst case scenario, and that is the reference to the default events in the paper. So the chip should get to keep those things unless things go terribly wrong, and that is why we have some of the protections in the paper. In terms of the lease agreement, there's 3 key things that we have come back to you today with in respect of that agreement. The first is the rental policy for existing tenants and how that can transfer across to the chip. We have had extensive discussions with the regulator in respect of that, and The options set out in the paper are the options that the regulator is comfortable with. And so that context is really important. Secondly, there's some detail around how the CHIP can borrow against the leased revenue, i.e. in terms of the leased portfolio. And again, those provisions there are aimed at setting the CHIP up for success so that it can enable new housing supply. And finally, there's some detail about a proposed renewal right for the CHIP. So the initial term for the lease is 35 years, and what we're suggesting is that in order to improve the CHIP's borrowing capability to enable new housing supply, that the CHIP has a renewal right for another 15 years, subject to HUD being comfortable with that in terms of the deed of grant requirements, and also just a technical point on deemed subdivision in terms of resource consents. Finally, the third kind of part of this, other than the trust deed, which has already been signed by council, is the reporting and relationship agreement. And that's a really important document because the intention of that is it sits across all of these arrangements. It really gives the flavour of the ongoing working relationship between council and CHIP. The CHIP it's not a CCO, and it's really important that it's not a council-controlled organisation to get access to IRRS, but it is a council organisation. It's in the family, and the relationship and reporting agreement is really the backbone of that. It's how will the two entities work together on a day-to-day basis and make sure that they're working together to enable the CHIP to be successful. And it recognises the fact that you can't see everything in the future, and the parties are going to have to work together to solve issues as they come up and maximise opportunities for the CHIP. So, do you want to add anything, Jesse?
That's great.
Okay. Yeah, happy to take any questions, but we just wanted to give you that overall flavour.
Thank you very much for that extra detail. Councillors, just so you know how we're going to roll with questions, I'm going to give us a bit of a longer time on questions than what we've had in other committees because it's been such a busy week, but I will have to ask that you do take the report as read and that questions are kept on topic and at a strategic and governance level. I will be strict if the questions asked are not relevant to the papers. I have two people still on the question list, Councillor Free and Councillor Chung.
Thank you. I'm really comfortable with a lot of the paper, and I think we've just got to do this, and we've already agreed to do most of it. But I guess it's one thing that I was alerted to is the fact that we are going to start transferring some property and keeping some property. And I guess for me, some of this property still needs a lot of upgrading. We know that. So my question is, we've put aside $268 million in our LTP to do the upgrades, but what about if it actually costs significantly more? Is there some way to give the money, put the money into what needs to be done, but retain the ability to actually recognise the fact that we've put in more than we needed to under the original deed of grant?
I can answer that, yeah. You're right that the obligation to upgrade the properties, there is a risk that Poutū costs significantly more. It's quite right that that obligation stays with the council as owner as the vast majority of the properties. You can't transfer a significant liability like $268 million to a brand new organisation. The way the arrangements work, a lot of this, the spare money that comes through these arrangements manifest in what we call the major maintenance fund, and to the extent there is surplus cash in that major maintenance fund, the council will have the opportunity to recover some of the surplus spend on Poutū upgrades above $180 million. That's in the provisions in the document. So yes, there is the possibility of recovering some of that overspend on the properties.
And then the other thing I wondered about is eventually after we came to the end of the deed of grant terms, which was 2037, I think, we would have been free to dispose of property if some of it had become severely unaffordable. But what will our ability now be as property owners to actually be flexible enough if there's real issues?
So the lease agreement will have detailed provisions on the sort of damage destruction events that you're talking about. So if the insurance proceeds aren't enough for reinstatement of a particular property, there will have to be discussions between the CHIP and the council as to what happens with that particular property. It may be that it is no longer part of the lease, but that would be by agreement at the time. It may be that you have to reprioritise some of the maintenance work that will be set out in the asset management plan, and prioritise that property over other properties that the work could be delayed on. So there's I think that goes to my point earlier about there will be things that need to be worked through as they come up, and you can't solve for every single situation. So it's important that everyone's aligned on the principles of what council and what CHIP are trying to achieve, which is a better outcome for tenants and increased new social housing supply in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just along with the deed, I'm kind of interested to know, because we did have a legal, binding agreement. How has that been resolved?
So we've had a lot of conversations with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development about the deed of grant. They are comfortable with the arrangements as set out in all of the previous decisions that council has made and with what is set out in this paper. And so we have prepared a draft amendment agreement to the deed of grant, which will effectively bless the arrangements and deem the deed of grant to be amended to reflect what council and the CHIP have come to in terms of these arrangements.
So will that come back to us? Because I imagine as council, us to the CEO, to the CHIP board, I mean, the original agreement was between council and the Crown. So how does the changes get ratified?
So we're proposing to effectively deem the grant to be amended by all of the arrangements set out in the funding agreement and the lease agreement and the trust deed and everything that we're using to set up the arrangements. I don't think it would be a very efficient use of funds to go through a painstaking exercise of trying to amend every single provision in the deed of grant that might need amending. And so HUD are comfortable with that approach, that effectively the deed of grant is deemed to be amended to reflect all of the arrangements.
And does the 2037 date still hold any significance at all? And in terms of we had to stay and keep the same numbers and stay in the social housing, and 2037 was the date?
Yes, that date will remain.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Chung.
Great, thank you for that. I've had the opportunity to spend some time in our city housing, and I've interacted with several of the council staff there who I think are absolutely superb. So what's the employment status with these staff that are actually working with the tenants in this housing? Are they going to transfer to the CHIP, or are they going to stay with the city council?
Councillor Chung, there's a process now where the council is going through its own process of essentially well, I wouldn't say disestablishing roles, but notifying staff that there's a change, and then at the same time the CHIP is creating a future structure for their organisation, for the CHIP, and then there'll be an alignment there essentially of what roles could move across and what roles would need to be applied for. But that's a process with the CHIP that they're undertaking, and and at this point in time they're also in the sort of final stages of the recruitment process for the Chief Executive of the CHIP. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McNulty.
Kia ora. Hopefully I'm not getting too in the weeds here, but I've been made aware this morning that we're looking at potentially striking out Clause 15, where we hold a minimum of 10% of a leased portfolio available for affordable rental tenants. I'm just wondering if you can give a bit of background or knowledge to why that's come to it and what other cities are doing around that clause.
So this was a clause that council has previously specifically requested that's included, and so that was a council decision effectively. So council wanted to know if it would be possible to have a provision which says that 10% have to be effectively non-MSD waitlist tenants, and that was to give council some comfort around tenants that the council would ordinarily have in its social housing portfolio, but which may not otherwise, those people may not otherwise make it onto the MSD waitlist. So that is the purpose of that provision, and the regulator was comfortable including that because most CHIPs do have a mix of public housing waitlist tenants and those not on the public housing waitlist. So that provision reflects what council wanted based on a previous meeting.
Do other councils that have established CHIPs have similar clauses, or have they just come to that blend of tenants through natural process?
Most of them just through a natural process, which is what the regulator observes on a day-to-day basis anyway, and gave us that feedback.
Cool. And committee members, I'll just note, because there is an amended substantive, Emily's just going to scroll down to that. These amendments have been brought by Councillor Paul. They're officer supported, but because it is an amended substantive, this is the time to ask the questions on an amended substantive as well. And then when we move into debate, we will be able to ask questions on councillors maybe that have brought other amendments. Councillor Foon.
Kia ora. Justin might be around, sorry, just give me a moment to collect myself. Can I just ask in relation to the participant this morning in public participation, there was can I just ask our team about the timing on the tenants group or panel, so probably not for you, and just in relation to that, and will be in relation to one of the amendments, can you give us an idea of the updated numbers on the waiting list for community housing and what our plans are to get this number down?
Thank you, Councillor Foon. So there's a tenant drop-in session that'll be relating to the CHIP engagement that'll run through April and May. The panel terms of reference have been finalised and they're going out to tenants via a newsletter this week and through other channels. And really that's primarily because we've been waiting to establish the CHIP board, so that's why it hasn't sort of occurred a little bit sooner. In regards to the waiting list, I can get Angelique maybe just to comment on that, if that's okay.
Morena koutou. We've had quite an extensive project on our waitlist for some time now. Currently we've got around 560 people on our waitlist. We've been working with MSD to do a data match exercise. How many people on our waitlist are also on the public housing register? Because until now we've never seen both sets of data. So we know that 43% of people on our waitlist are already on the MSD public housing register following this data match. We know there's another 44% that should be eligible based on the income criteria that we've received from them. So we met most recently last week with MSD. They've set up a project team and they're going to help us for that 87% of applicants to be able to transition those that want to be onto the MSD public housing register. And we will be doing that together and contacting all of those applicants. Then we've got 13% remaining on the wait list that aren't eligible for the MSD public housing register, and that's because their income levels are too high. So city housing eligibility criteria is much higher than the MSD public housing register. So that 13%, is a separate project, and we're still looking into how we can support that cohort of people.
Thank you, Angelique. Councillor Abdurrahman.
Kia ora, Tim. I think the reason we're transferring the CHIP into CHIP is that we are not able to do sustainable in building houses and looking after tenants. And we're putting all this stress on the new trustee. In case we lost confidence on those trustees, what power do we have to protect the tenants? That's the first question. Secondly, are we still receiving tenants' application? If so, on what basis?
So I can answer the first question. So the trust deed has some mandatory details around skills and experience that the trustees must have, and so that is, for example, experience in tenancy management, experience in property management, experience in development activities, knowledge of Tau Māori. There's a whole list of different things that the trustees as a combined group have to have, and then there is a subset which each trustee has to have. So if the council, for example, loses confidence in the council-appointed trustees, of which there are 4 that sit on the trust board of 9, the council can remove its trustees at any time, and it can do that for any reason, actually, not only because it's lost confidence in terms of the skills and experience that its trustees have, but there is also another provision in the trust deed which means that if all of the other trustees are effectively satisfied that a trustee is not able to discharge the trustee's duties, which may be because it actually doesn't have the relevant skills and experience and is not effectively pulling their weight, if they unanimously agree, the trustees on the board can remove a trustee, but that would be very, very unusual, and I would not expect that to happen, but there is that safety net at the end of the day.
On the second part, thanks, Angelique.
In relation to applications, at this stage we are still taking them. The closing of the waitlist is imminent, but there is a big piece of work around that. As you can imagine, we work with a lot of different agencies and stakeholders, particularly agencies like DCM, and take people that are homeless or rough sleeping into our housing. So there's a piece of work working with all the stakeholders to let them know what the alternatives are. In terms of our team receiving those applications, those high priority people that are desperate for housing, we are still housing people, where we can on a weekly basis. But of course we need to close it, and we need to close it soon. I think it's important to note that under Housing Upgrade Phase 2, we would have had to close the waitlist anyway, to keep the housing for rehousing of our current tenant community. So I would say the recommendation for how we're closing and when we're closing will go to the CHIP and WCC transition group within the next week or 2.
Thank you, Angelique. Councillor Paul.
So I just had a process question, then I had a question about the paper. So in terms of the process, so 15 is struck out as part of the amended substantive. So if people support, will another councillor, if they want to restore that, have to move that as an amendment?
It doesn't have to be part of the amended substantive if you don't want it to be.
Oh, no, I do. Okay. Yeah, I do. I just want people to be clear. Oh, yeah. Cool. So that's out, and when people agree to the paper, they're agreeing to that. Yep, sweet.
Cool. Nods that.
I just understand.
I don't really like the way of amending substantives where it's not possible to actually restore it to the by vote to the original.
We'll just get
That's what I'm asking, how would someone
We'll
restore
just
it if
get
they
some
would
officer
want to?
advice over the microphone if you can, Emily. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Just to note that if this is moved as the amended substantive, then it would need to be another amendment by a councillor who hasn't already spoken, moved or seconded to move this.
So you're able to
15.
foreshadow amendment to retain recommendation 15.
So who's moving the paper?
I am.
Councillor Paul will be.
If we want, we can leave it in there and we can just vote against it.
Would be
If that's
better.
okay.
Because it's a bit tricky.
I just, yeah.
Arguments.
Yeah.
Maybe
Councillor
I'm not fussed either way of however it's done. I just wanted to be clear about what I'm asking my colleagues to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Paul.
So should we just leave it in?
So
cool.
15 will be back in.
Cool. Okay, thank you. And then my question about the paper was, so you said that we can take that 10% requirement out, and most chips do a bit of a mix anyway. So what protections do we have with the chip so that they don't choose to reduce the places of public housing spaces in favour of affordable housing or any other, or even full rental housing?
So there's in the trust deed provisions around what the charitable purposes of the trust are, which include a number of things: social housing, affordable housing, public housing, transitional housing. There's a whole lot of them. In terms of the mix of tenants, that becomes an operational question for the CHIP because it's a separate entity. But I would note that if it has access to IRRS places, it will want to make sure that it is housing tenants who are off the public housing wait list in order to get access to the subsidy, because that materially improves the financial position of the CHIP. But there are not sufficient places for the number of properties that the CHIP has. So it will, by definition, have a mix of public housing tenants and tenants who are not on the wait list.
Anything I'd add, the two examples to this circumstance, which are Haumaru in Auckland and Otatahi Community Trust in Christchurch, are both around 40 to 50% IRS and have both peaked at about that level. That's our experience. The rest are affordable rentals.
Cool. Thank you. Councillor McNulty.
Thank you. Stoked to hear that the Toitai Mahana Tenants Union is being established, so well done, Brett. Unions are a public good. What I'm wondering is, does the CHIP have the power to enable the voice of that union within its structure? And if we as the council feel that the Tenants Union is not being given due voice around that CHIP, do we have any mechanism to impose perhaps a louder tenant's voice represented at the table?
So one of the things that the regulator requires is that the CHIP has a tenant participation policy, and so CHIPs can design how they like for tenant participation to work, which might include the panel that you've just talked about. So I would say that it is a regulatory perspective on that rather than a council perspective. The regulator requires the CHIP to take account of tenants' views and involve them in its decision making. There's lots of different ways the CHIP could do that, and so I think that is the way that that concern is addressed, as opposed to council needing to control that, because it is starting to get into that grey area of control by the council over the CHIP, and that is something that it is very clear that the council cannot do, because it starts swaying the CHIP back into being a council-controlled organisation if it is too involved in operational matters. But I think your concern is covered off from the regulatory perspective.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, just drawing your attention to clause 25, just note that the regular reporting requested is quarterly. Is there any concern about the effort that's needed for quarterly reporting? Because I understand the reporting was planned to be 6 monthly.
Yeah, I guess our concern on this is that feels quite onerous for a new entity that is getting up and running, is trying to get things off the ground, and to be having to go and probably survey tenants to do that, I think is quite onerous in the initial stages. So I think quarterly is too difficult for a brand new entity.
So, yeah, just wanted to understand officer advice on this, given it's in the amended substantive.
Kim? Okay, cool. No, you're right.
Sorry, I don't have much else to add other than that.
You want some advice? Our advice would be to make it 6 monthly. 3 monthly for a new organisation feels onerous to us.
Right. Cool. Councillor Kim for the next part.
Thank you, Chair. Just a correction, if that's okay. It's been brought to my attention, item number 27 there, if we can change just the wording from rather than will be eligible, if we can have can apply. And the reason being is that the grant subcommittee, you need to be a legal entity if you want to receive a grant, and the tenants panel won't be a legal entity. So if we can maybe just amend that to say agree that the tenants panel can apply, if that's okay. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, otherwise the grant subcommittee. Yeah. Otherwise we'll need to change the terms of the grant subcommittee.
Cool. Just with a bit of the advice we're receiving, let's take maybe a 5-minute adjournment, and then we will just work with the mover of the motion and officers. No, Councillor Pennant, we'll just take a 5-minute adjournment.
I don't like to waste paper, but I'm just wondering if we could have these printed out. I'm just finding it a bit difficult.
All right, we'll look at that.
Yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right. giving a little bit of grace. If we all allow each other just a little bit more time, we were able to resolve a few things in that 7 minutes. All right, I've got Councillor Randall, Councillor Calvert, Councillor Brown, Poiwi Hohaia. If you have any partai, can you please just signal as soon as possible, because we would love to move on to debate. Thank you. Councillor Brown has left the room. All right, Councillor Randall.
Sorry, I'm happy.
You're happy? Excellent. Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. And I just want to clarify a couple of things, and it might be Angelique that might have to answer some of these, but are we quite clear of how many people, without any double counting, are on our housing, generally require social housing in Wellington?
Councillor Calvert, short answer is yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And of the, talked about the 13%, and they wouldn't make the social housing wait list. Do they have any common characteristics? And I'm thinking about, they've got certain accessibility requirements, perhaps whilst on a fixed income might be, or an income higher than that, have significant health issues, that sort of thing. I'm just interested to understand.
Not particularly. I mean, the most common characteristic is that they're working.
Right.
So even if you're on living wage, you're still not eligible for the MSD public housing wait list.
Okay.
It is low.
Yeah.
So especially when you've got more than one adult in the household too, that easily sort of tips you over that criteria.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Poiwi Hohaia.
Yeah, kia ora. Just a question around definition of affordable rental tenant. You mentioned that CHIPs normally have a mix of MSD tenants, eligible tenants and others, and one of the recommendations mentions affordable rental tenants. Can you define what that type of tenant is, please?
There is no one definition of that. I think if you take kind of two ends of the spectrum, it would be someone on the public housing waiting list getting IRRS subsidies and just market rent. So it's somewhere in between those two bookings, right? That will be a decision for the CHIP in terms of the policies it has for what an affordable rental housing concept is in light of what the CHIP is doing.
Cool.
No, nothing more. I mean, it's an incredibly subjective question to define affordable, relevant to the circumstances at the time that a lot of public agencies have grappled with it. As Angela says, tends to be sub-market rental housing of some shape or form.
Thank you.
Thank you, committee members. With no more partai, we will move on to debate. Mawai Te Motini Whakataka Koutou is their mover, Councillor Paul.
Oh, well, kia ora koutou. I want to start by thanking Catherine, first and foremost, for leading us through this process over the last year. I want to thank you guys for coming and answering our questions today, and for also working on this agreement and making sure that it's robust. I want to thank the tenants, and thank you, Brett, for coming to talk to us today on behalf of the IRRS for All campaign. And I want to acknowledge Councillor Matthews, Councillor Brown and Poiwi Liz for their work on the CHIP and getting us to this stage. You did a really excellent job on the metrics, I think, in particular, and on the principles and the agreement. And I think this leaves us with a lot of confidence. Public housing is an issue that brings us all together. It's an issue that we can all agree on, and that we've found agreement across the political spectrum last term and this term. And we can all agree on that because we can all agree that everybody deserves a warm, dry, safe and healthy home. Public housing ensures that those on low incomes or benefits are able to live and fully participate in our beautiful city. If you want diverse communities, families and children, disabled people, bus drivers, cleaners, teachers and nurses in your community, then support the creation of more public housing. The key things that I looked for when I read over this paper are three things. One, the well-being and affordability for our existing tenants. Two, increasing the overall supply of public housing in Wellington. And three, protection against the divestment of public housing in any form. And this is where I just particularly want to acknowledge Catherine for answering all my questions late at night last night. That left me with a lot of clarity and a lot of certainty. So I'll move the paper. I've added in some metrics in there which are officer supported, but I guess the big thing I want to urge my colleagues today is to vote against recommendation 15, which sets aside 10% of public housing spaces for non-public housing tenants. So to give you a bit of background about that provision, it was requested by the Mayoral Task Force on Social Housing, which I was the tenant liaison for. And the reason that we asked for that is because city housing has a history of housing people who might not be necessarily prioritised by the government's criteria. So that has traditionally included certain fit elderly is what it's called, people with certain disabilities and sometimes migrant and refugee background families. And so it was really important for the task force to make sure that we would still have a place for those people within our council housing, regardless of what the government stipulates as the highest need, because that's the way that the public housing register is ordered, is based on need. However, we've got the Te Kāinga program now, and through the Te Kāinga program we provide affordable housing within the inner city. We've got a target of 1,000 affordable houses. We just opened up 74 new units this week in Te Pū, and some of you have visited those affordable housing, and that's our opportunity to provide housing to strategic parts of the population that we want within our city. So with Te Kāinga, we've stipulated that we want to support hospo workers and bus drivers and people that work for iwi and for public sector and for cleaners and for nurses and for teachers, and that is our opportunity there to house the people that we really want in our city. So I don't think we should dictate to the CHIP how much they should set aside for that housing and what that might look like. Also, a 10% threshold for affordable housing would mean a 10% reduction in overall public housing spaces, which in my eyes is a divestment in public housing. And we want as much public housing spaces as possible in our portfolio, because public housing tenants can access the income-related rent subsidy, and that is our ability as a council to not be able to access that subsidy is what has made us make this decision in the first place, because we have been subsidising council tenants' rents at 70% of market rates, and they have not been able to access a critical subsidy. And I will note that that is an arbitrary decision made by the government around not extending the income-related rent subsidy to council tenants in Aotearoa. And I will also say that the Green Party is the only party in Aotearoa that continues to advocate for that extension to council tenants. And I just want to thank Beth too for helping us work on an amendment that would grant $1,000 to the tenant panel when it stood up, and they will be able to access the same funding as Residents Association, because as Ben said, unions are important, they're a public good, and the tenants deserve to have the backing of us and the support of us and the resourcing from us so that they can make sure that their voices are heard by those making decisions on their behalf on the CHIP Trust. So please vote against recommendation 15, and I'll be happy to respond to any points about that in the right of reply. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. I will be the seconder, but reserve my right to speak. I've got Councillor Randall, and was that, yep, Councillor Chung next. Councillor Randall, to you for debate.
Hello. So I'd like to move an amendment, please. I was wondering if you could put the amendment up on the screen. So thank you. First of all, I support this move. I don't want to change any of the delegations or the key activities in this report, but this is a big move. It's a complex move, and I just want to make these amendments to improve our oversight because we have got an ongoing, it's our baby, and I think at least in the beginning we need to keep a close eye on it as it makes its first steps as a separate entity. I think that I want them to be independent, and I want to be sure that as they step away from, as this key function of council steps away into this new way of being delivered, that they are focused and we understand that they're becoming more independent, they're taking their first steps. There's three parts to this. The first part is really to amend clause 7A to add, including the likely forecast yield on any significant investment. This is really one of the key metrics that we want to understand, to be sure that when there are investments, that we understand that the investments are not only in new social housing, is not only environmentally sustainable, not only is it socially sustainable, but also it's financially sustainable. We also want to amend the reporting timeframe for the first six to be amended to, so for the first 2 years, that we want to just have some reporting back on a 3-monthly basis and 6 monthly thereafter. And thirdly, to agree that the CEO will report back, because we're delegating the CEO with a lot of responsibility in terms, and so we just want her to understand when she's exercised those key delegations that we are kept up on the journey, and so we know the progress that's being done. There are clauses 11, 12, 18, 19 and 22 all have CEO delegations, and so we've put this up to add this as an extra clause at the end. I want to talk a bit more about the reporting timeframe. I think it's important that we understand that there's ongoing, we have ongoing financial responsibilities and commitments, and that also that we want to have confidence that they're going on this journey, and we have some heads up. Finally, I understand from talking to officers in the break that all of these amendments are agreed to by officers, but I actually want to stop there and perhaps get their advice on this. So, but I hope you all see that, again, this is really to make this work better, and that we know what's happening. So I ask for your support. Thanks.
Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Randall. Mā wai e whakahounga e tautoko. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Free. I'm just going to ask for just to check that officer advice, and then we can move back into debate.
So on, thank you, Chair, on 1 and 2 that were listed there before, 1 and 3, we support 1 and 3. We think the item 2 of reporting back on a 3-monthly rather than 6-monthly may be a little too onerous for the CHIP to report back. So 7A, at the top there, we support that. And we also support 28. Is it, sorry? Yeah, 28, but the one in the middle, we don't support that. Simply because we feel that the frequency of being 3 months rather than 6 months may be a little bit too onerous on the CHIP.
Okay, this wasn't the understanding I had in the break. So if I can just make one further comment on that.
Yep, I think just to clarify, so I believe Bell Gully were happy with the second one, but in chatting to legal advice within council has said that that's a bit too onerous.
Okay.
So I believe, but we will just be super clear on that.
Sorry for the confusion there. So to echo Kim's points, I think generally 3-monthly or quarterly reporting is too onerous, but what we think would be okay is 3-monthly or quarterly reporting for key financial metrics, which I believe is what the councillor was concerned about. What those particular metrics would be, we would need to discuss with the CHIP to make sure that wasn't too onerous in terms of reporting. But so long as there wasn't a need for tenant surveys or anything like that, which I believe the councillor wasn't asking for, we think that exceptions-based quarterly reporting, if you like, would be practicable.
Okay, so I'm happy for that amendment to be on key financial metrics, to be added 3 monthly basis on key financial metrics for the first 2 years, so that the officers' support can be gained.
And just to clarify, that will have officer support.
Excellent, thank you.
So if you could just add it after basis. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
It looks. Are you happy with what's on the screen?
Should be after time frame, should it? Okay. But so that's reporting time. Yes, so that's fine. That's the amendment I'm putting in. Yeah, and has officer
Councillor Pannett, you had a question on the amendment.
Could I just clarify, either from staff or Councillor Randall? So, when the 6 monthly reporting is done, is that just on the financial metrics or is it overall? Okay, so is it possible just to edit it slightly just to make sure that's absolutely clear? Just because the way it's written just looks a bit, it's a bit.
And after and full reporting on 6 monthly.
Thank you. Yeah, full reporting on 6 months.
And full reporting.
No, just take off thereafter.
I like the 6 monthly.
Sorry, take out the word thereafter, because essentially that's going to start from day one. So full reporting on a 6 monthly basis.
We all happy with that?
I'm happy with that. Thank you for your indulgence, everybody.
It's a good, if we can allow a bit of grace and resolve issues, it's always worth that time. Excellent. All right, he takai hei tau patu. Is there any debate? Councillor Free? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just speak briefly as a seconder to this motion. Look, we're taking trust and confidence here, and I actually believe in what we're doing with the chip. But I do think you build trust and confidence through frequent communication, and that's why I'm really happy to support, a very basic reporting on a quarterly basis and a more fulsome reporting on a 6 monthly basis, so that we don't get the no surprises approach, and we do have chance maybe to ask questions and build our confidence and trust in this chip journey.
Excellent. Is there any other debate? Great. All right, let's move forward to a vote. Oh, sorry, right of reply, Tony. Yeah, of course.
So I'd just like to thank everybody, all councillors, but especially officers who have acted very swiftly just to give their confirmation. My apologies for doing this a bit too late in the process, but yeah, I'm of a councillor who believes in trust but verify, and I think this supports you and asks you for your support. Thank you.
Cool. E nāne kia pōtetia te motini. I now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Those in favour, please press 1. Those against, please press 2. Woohoo, ko mana. Righto, we go back to the substantive debate. I have Councillor Chung on the list to talk to the substantive.
Thank you. I have a question for Councillor Poor. I just wanted to clarify, she wants to remove the minimum of 10% figure. So do you have a figure that in mind that you think that should be? And I just want to clarify also that you were talking about the different criteria for council housing and MSD housing, and you're talking about the new immigrants, refugees, and so forth. Is that criteria in the MSD qualification or these council qualification? So where would you actually get more? The reason why I'm asking this is that, as I mentioned before, I spent a bit of time with the council housing tenants, and I was actually very pleasantly surprised by the broad mix of different people that I met and their reasons for actually moving into council housing. So I've reformed my views on the type of people in there. So that's why I'm asking.
Thank you, Councillor Chung. Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. And as somebody who does actually have a working background in both council and government social housing, I preface my comments with that background. I don't belong to any political party, but I'm pleased to say that I and probably other independents have always expressed firmly that we believe there should have been an equitable approach to giving IRS to eligible tenants, whether they be in Kāinga Ora homes or whether they were in council housing. And that in part has led us to this debate today because they haven't been entitled to that. I'm pleased to see Councillor Poole speaking in support of residents' associations and seeing them as a type of union. So, go residents' associations. So, yeah. And I'd also just like to point out I was deputy chair of the Mayor's Task Force into Social Housing last year and party to a lot of the conversations and heard from a lot of different people. And a lot of people working in social housing, and it was very clear to us. It was made very clear to us that we should make sure that we did retain the ability to house people that weren't on the social housing list. And if you think about the origins of council housing was really there to catch the in-between. So you had state housing providing social housing, the government, what we called priority A and Bs. You had council providing priority C and Ds because they couldn't find good quality accommodation in the private market. So and often they were, we knew them as pensioner cottages or old single people. That's what councils tended to house. And that hasn't gone away. And my real fear is if we don't put part of our stock into making sure that it is affordable, but it is targeted at those people that I call in between the priority A and Bs and the full market, then we're going to have a piece of our a number of Wellingtonians not able to find quality homes that's specific to the needs, and it might be accessibility. It might also be being near their whānau or family, because we know that often people need to be together and actually offer each other support. So there's lots of reasons, and also just enabling a little bit of that mixed housing model as well, just to enable that. I think that would be enabling that 10%. Now that 10%, yes, they won't get IRS, but they'll probably pay closer to the market rental. But they're still paying their way. So it's not really going to cost us much in the way of money. And I know Liz Kelly was also on, and I know she's on the CHIP, but she was also on the Mayor's Task Force last year, and she's got direct experience in running a CHIP, and she was very supportive of this. And I remember her saying, look, sometimes we just need to provide some housing to give people a hand up, not a handout. And she gave us examples of how that had actually worked. And I believe that's why we need to have a 10% benchmark with our social housing stock to ensure that we do enable that type of thing to be happening. So I will be supporting recommendation number 15, and I really do encourage you all to really think hard about not enabling at least a certain amount to be held over for those instances where we just don't have the we can't describe it at the moment, but there will be. If anybody's worked in social housing, know there are those type of cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Calvert. Right on time as well, 3 minutes. Councillor Free.
Thank you. Look, I think the CHIP for a long time was an idea that we really didn't want to have to consider, because we really want to keep our social housing. We wanted the government, in fact, to make it possible for us to keep it through the provision of IRRS for our tenants. That's not the way it's panned out. And we're where we are, and I do not want to delay any further with getting on with the chip and making sure we do everything we can to make it successful. Because if it is as successful as Christchurch and Auckland's examples have been, we will be on a much more sustainable footing. And I want us to be on a sustainable footing, not just for our tenants and for the good of our city, but also so our ratepayers are not having to face financial uncertainties well into the future. We do need to make this model work. So thank you everybody for voting for the extra reporting. I think it will only build confidence and be helpful. Appreciate that it was supported. I am going to support the 10%. I wasn't going to support anything else, Tam, if you tried to make it any bigger, because this has been crafted and gone through a regulatory checking process. And, you know, there are rules about it being a chip. We don't have as much control. We do have to sit with the parameters, and I'm confident these parameters are being discussed and approved. You know, I've asked questions about the deed and if that's been covered off. I've asked questions about what happens if there's, you know, unexpected events like we've seen can happen in parts of New Zealand. How would we cope with that? What are the protections and provisions for extraordinary things to happen that we don't anticipate? But I think in terms of the settings we're approving now, there's been so much work going on that I'm not going to be agreeing to any. I'll agree to the 10. I had a feeling you might want to increase it, and I might not have agreed to that. Oh yeah, okay. I'm happy to add in the things about the tenant, you know, our well-being and the tenant panel. I think, you know, hey, we do these kinds of things, and it's good to give people a feeling of empowerment. Basically, I think we just really need to have confidence and get on with this and see how it unfolds. I also would like to thank Catherine for answering some of my questions quite late in the piece, and gave me a lot of confidence again about the process and that we're embarked on. So yeah, for me, it's a yes basically to this, and I hope our confidence in it will be really well justified.
Thank you, Councillor Free. I'm just going to use my slot as the seconder now. So the most important thing is that our tenants are really well housed, and I just want to in particular recognise the work of Councillor Paul and Councillor Calvert on the working group last term, the amount of outreach that has gone into driving that tenant base and making them feel like they have a part in this process. Our tenants and our tenancy advisors are preparing for a big transition, and it's really important that we keep their well-being in mind and manage the way that we ensure, and it's so great to see that there's a lot of agreement around the table about maintaining their input from tenants in the new CHIP process. I'd also like just to thank Catherine, Angelique, Kim, Angela, Jessie and Bridget for their attendance to all of our late night questions, and in particular to Catherine, who is off on sick leave today, but she has put in a massive amount of work and detail into responding on the go. Lastly, I will be supporting the removal of number 15 from the paper. I believe that public housing should go to those most in need, and I'm really confident in Councillor Paul's introduction that this is something that we should be looking into as a public housing provider. It also sends a really good signal to our tenants that are maybe a bit anxious there about the transition. I have Councillor Pennant.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you everyone for the work that they put into. However, I will not be supporting most of these amendments, and Councillor Paul, correct me if I'm misquoting you, but you said there was unanimity on this around social housing, and I very, very, very strongly continue to oppose the move to the CHIP. This last council and this council has basically agreed to losing control or getting rid of a large percentage of our assets and disempowering this council, the whole local government sector, because of a whim of a government or a particular policy view. And there has to be some accountability here.
We have party politics here, and people have been very quiet about what has been happening in this sector, this very, very important sector, which has been underfunded essentially to do a much bigger job. And the thing about making big decisions like this is that they have long tail. You know, it might not be this year, but in 30 years down the track, or 10 years, or whenever the next national government takes power and they cut the IRRs, it's not particularly helpful. Again, Councillor Paul, I think you used the word arbitrary around the IRRS. The thing I find so objectionable about this, it wasn't arbitrary at all. It was completely deliberate. This current government does not like local government, wants to take most functions, the most important functions, off it, and so wouldn't make a reasonable policy call, which they supported in opposition, to extend it. And they should have done so, and it is shameful that they did not do that. It is critical that local government is a part of the social housing solution ongoing to make sure that all Wellingtonians are well housed, which of course we all agree with. Section 15, Councillor Paul, you know I'm very sympathetic to your arguments. However, and I'll probably vote against it, but for different reasons, because I just don't agree with leasing anything. But I think we just fundamentally...
Councillors, can I just ask for your attention while members are speaking?
Yes,
Councillor Chung and Councillor Young.
Is that grouping a whole lot of people together who are highly vulnerable, who are victims of society's collective failures, is not really my ideal solution. And I think we need to keep moving to that place where we do have genuinely mixed communities where, you know, everyone benefits from those. I particularly find number 6 difficult, and so there's a strong vote against that. There's too much risk here around sale. We need to be getting more social housing into our stock and less private right over the country. So look, I appreciate my words are in vain, but I think at least for the record that there does need to be shown that there was some opposition in years to come. And Chair, I'd just appreciate if you could take these reasonably slowly and record all votes, and maybe even separately, because I will be voting for some and voting against. But I'd just like, this council is not going to have much to do. I said to the Mayor, your workload is going to be a lot lighter, you're just going to manage the parks and gardens and libraries, that this council needs to address this issue of what we are here to do, because I actually think we do serve a valuable function, and it is deeply unfortunate that Labor has been so hostile to our sector.
Thank you. I have Councillor Randall. I'll just remind you that you have already spoken, but you are able to speak again at committee, so I'll give you just a gentle reminder there. Thanks.
Yes, I thought I was only speaking to the amendment. But so I just have a very short thing. First of all, I want to say this is very complex, and as a new councillor who is not at all expert in this area, I am struggling to get across the issues. I do thank the officers. We're very reliant on them running the business, and I have a lot of confidence in the way that, in the information and the depth that they've put stuff together, but I'm still very nervous. I also want to talk particularly about item 13. I find it a little, I have decided I'm going to vote against this for a somewhat unusual reason, in that given that this council's been penalised in a sense for running our own social housing, we've at least got the benefit of having the flexibility of helping those that fall through the cracks. And certainly central government does have some significant cracks when it comes to dealing with individual cases, and whether, you know, and their definition of need and their definition that they are eligible. And the fact that we have a city that will be able to have some flexibility to support those that don't meet all specific criteria, I think is an important element. And I think that clause 15 helps ensure that we pass that element over to the CHIP, and that the CHIP has some flexibility to maintain those sort of tenants. So sort of a bit ironically, I actually care deeply about supporting those who really, due to circumstance, do need this help. and that we I as a councillor want to support them and give the CHIP the flexibility around that. Thanks.
Look, Councillor Calvert, real quick, please.
Thank you, and thank you for your discretion. Look, there's one point I didn't mention in my initial thing, and that was about the Te Kāinga program of work. I just want to, and that was that was given as a rationale why we shouldn't have 10%. Can I just point out, and we heard before Christmas that we know one of those developments has been handed, I think it was intended to be handed over to Kāinga Ora for social housing because they had a greater need, so that reduced the affordable housing numbers. And then we had another development which I'm not sure quite what I could say, but it was potentially not going, it was going to require extra ratepayers funds anyway. So can I just, if you're thinking that Te Kāinga will take care of those people in the gaps, it won't. Thank you.
I te kai kaunihira Councillor Paul e pairangi ana koe ki te whakakoutou. Kia koe te tikanga, right of replies, please, Councillor Paul.
Cool. Okay, so it's clear that there's a little bit of confusion about what I'm proposing in 15. So to be really clear, recommendation 15, as included in the report, is saying that 10% of all the houses that the CHIP managers will be reserved for affordable housing. So you've got two groups of people. You've got public housing tenants, and those are people who are on the public housing register and they are able to access the income-related rent subsidy, which is a government subsidy that caps their rent at 25% of their income. So it's a government subsidy, and that subsidy going to public housing tenants is good because it's revenue that that the CHIP will be able to bring in, and they can reinvest that money into community development, into lifting the standards of the housing, and council doesn't have to subsidise that because that subsidy is coming from government. Affordable housing tenants is people who live in places that are subsidised below market rents. So in Te Kāinga, that's 80-90%, I think, reduction of the market rent. But we subsidise that. Council pays to subsidise that rent, and council, I think, would have to subsidise that 10% of placement. So it's actually going to cost us more money if we allocate that 10% and even beyond that. So I'm not asking for us to increase that threshold. I'm asking us to remove that placeholder because we want. Sorry, you can't interrupt my debate.
Was that a point of order? What is the specific point of order?
I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going.
Hang on. All right. Diane, are you raising a point of order? Can you please use your mic?
Yeah, look, I just was point of order about
which point of order? Sorry,
about inaccurate information, misrepresentation about the Te Kāinga and ratepayer money going into funding that 10%. I believe that's accurate.
Okay,
I'm looking for a signal, but
it's up to you.
Look, that's I think a fair assumption. I'm not going to uphold that point of order. I think we can continue with debate.
Yep, so it definitely will be, because who will subsidise that? No one will subsidise it, so it's just going to come out of magic. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I'm going to keep going. So I think that we, like I said, need 100% of our places going to people in public housing tenants. We need 100% of their government subsidy to be reinvested. So vote against recommendation 15. I just want to challenge this idea about mixed tenure, and there are comments made by Councillor Panner and Councillor Calvert around, you can't put high concentrations of low income, I guess high needs people in one area, otherwise it just creates problems. I think that this is a really problematic view. Like, people's incomes and the situations that they've found themselves in their lives, if they've been disabled, if they've had circumstances where they've experienced family violence and have ended up on the public housing register, is no reflection of their character.
Point of order. There is misrepresentation. It's very clear that this was about society's failures. Very, very clear.
Yep, and I'm talking about the concept of mixed tenure. So, okay, moving on.
Look, what were the specific words you took issue with?
I take issue with this point about the character. It's nothing to do with people's character, clearly. It is society's failure around abuse and all the rest of it.
Okay,
cool,
Councillor Paul, if you could just clarify that, and then you're free to continue.
Okay, cool. And the one thing that Councillor Tenant made a comment that said there was some that you wanted to vote against these things to show that there was some opposition to the chip. I want to acknowledge the many people that have worked hard at every other option before this option. I want to acknowledge the people who met with the Minister and advocated for income-related rents, the officers that have spent time working with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development and with MSD trying to access the income-related rents. I want to acknowledge the tenants who have talked to the Minister of Housing, have talked to the Minister of Finance, their local representatives. There have been many people throughout history who have tried to get access to the income-related rent subsidy, going beyond just voting against the paper. So, vote against Resolution 15, and I'm really looking forward to this tenants panel being set up so that we can hear the voice of tenants, so that that can be reflected in the establishment of the chip, and we can build more housing. Oh, sorry, and the last point I just wanted to make was around the Mayor not having anything to do except for parks and playgrounds and pools. I really object to that comment, and the Mayor is working really hard through the Let's Get Wellington Moving project to set up specified development projects through Let's Get Wellington Moving that will increase the supply of public housing. So there's lots going on in that space, and we're not simply giving things up. We are looking actively to extend the supply of public housing in Wellington. Kia ora.
E nāne ka pōtitia te motini, I now put the motion which has been moved and seconded.
So if you can, as I requested, you can take these separate, probably most
Which
of them
specific recommendations would you like
I'm
separately?
voting some and against, and there are many of them.
There are a lot of recommendations in this paper, Iona, so if you could single out.
No, so I want to vote 1 and 2, vote against 3 to 8, vote in favour of 9, vote against 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, up to 20, 21, 22, vote in favour of 23, and vote in favour of 24 to 27. Sorry, there's a lot of amendments here, so there does need to be some recognition. There's a bit of complexity.
Or just do them separately? All right, we're just going to do everyone separately because it's probably quicker than having an adjournment and figuring it all out. All right. Thank you, Democracy Services. Okay, this is a clause 1. It's too late, line by line. Ko mana. Clause 2. Okay. Diane? Voting on clause 3. Ko ngere, ko mana, that passed with 1 against. Right, we're doing 5, inclusive of A and B. So 5 altogether. Councillor Calvert. I know, yeah. Number 6. That number 5 passed. Sorry, I should be reading that out.
Dim services, can you do it manually? Could the councillor just simply raise a hand?
Thank you, Jen. Woohoo! All right. Ko mana, that is passed. Taking number 7. Ko mana, that is passed. John? Ko mana, that has passed. 9. Oh dear. We may have run out of batteries on a second remote. Thank you, everyone.
In favour? Carried.
Carried. Number 10. Councillor Winera. That is carried. Number 11. No, with John voting in favour, that's carried. Oh dear. That is carried. Clause 13.
With your leave, Chair, are we able to take sub-clauses separately?
What, like in a group?
Yeah, would it be possible to take 14 Charlie separately, please?
14 Charlie. Oh, see. Nico. No, I do know a bit of military talk. Yeah. Yep. 14C. So, all right, now let's vote on 14A and B. Iona, have you voted? Mana, that is passed. 14C. Ko mana, that is passed with 3 against. Number 15. Koengere, that is, the motion is, sorry, that lost. I'll just say lost. Clause 16. Clause 17. Clause 19. 18. John? Right, clause 19. Oh, that is carried. Sorry, I keep forgetting to say that. Oh, but- I'm just going to check with Councillor Pennant. Are there any that we can take on block? Could you just pull out the ones that you... Could we, councillors, could we do 20 to 22 together? Yep, cool. That is passed. Now 23 to 27. Excellent, that is passed. Did we have one more? 29? Oh, sorry, 28. Councillor Randalls, yep. All right, taking a vote on 28. Yeah, there. All right, ko mana, that is passed. Big paper, well done, everyone. Te Whai o Rangaponeki, Open Space and Recreation Strategy. Thank you all.
Yeah, sorry, could I just suggest we do the two little papers before lunch? Would that be, just get them out of the way? Oh, there's no lunch.
No
and
lunch.
There's no lunch, okay, all right.
Should we have, are we able to maybe see if we can get this paper done before 1 p.m. and then I let us all go? Yeah? Is it all right? Feel free to go grab a tea or a coffee. And welcome back. You must have stepped around.
I saw it. I wasn't very excited.
No. No mai kim fel e ala ki te hora e te kōrero. Welcome all. Welcome all. Feel free to introduce the report. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Chair. Today I'm introducing Te Whai o Rangaponeki, the draft open space and recreation strategy, ready to go out for public consultation. This is a review of the current Our Capital Spaces strategy, which is now 10 years old and requires review. Te Whai o Ranga means in the pursuit of wellness and epitomises the role that the open space and recreation play in our community.
Sorry, just a second. Members, we are still in committee, so if you are having conversations, can you keep it hush and out of... All right, sorry. Back over to you, Kim.
That's really good. Te Whai o Ranga means in the pursuit of wellness and epitomises the role that open space and recreation play in our community, the role of supporting the wellness of our people and the wellness of our environment. Looking after our city's open spaces and providing recreation opportunities are important parts of the council and providing what the people of Wellington want. They are also key building blocks of our community infrastructure and our natural environment. The team are here from Park, Sports and Recreation. We've got Ella in the middle, we have Shona over here, and then we have Sherilyn on the side, there we go, who've been doing a huge amount of work on this project for well over a year, and now have been doing a lot of good work gathering the information from various internal and external stakeholders and looking at what the future will look like for our open space and recreation network. The strategy developed has included extensive public consultation and research analysis into our open space and recreation network, including, I think, receiving over about 1,400 engagement survey responses as part of the early engagement process. Part of this process has also included 2 councillor workshops, one last year, you'll recall, and that discussed the scope of the strategy, and more recently, a workshop was held in February that discussed the strategic focuses in the strategy. In addition, a drop-in session was held for councillors a couple of weeks ago, and there are a number of questions that were raised and answered. So pending your approval today, the draft strategy will be available online on our website and as a PDF document and in a GIS format with interactive maps. Consultation on the draft strategy will go out for 4 weeks from the middle of March through to the middle of April, and we'll be advertising the consultation through a range of different channels to get feedback and submissions from a wide range of people and groups. So I'll now ask that the paper be taken as read, and the team are here to respond to any technical questions or questions you may have. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. He pātama yutu ai mua e tau patu. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Tenant.
Thank you for your great work on this. I think you've done a really great job, and it obviously was time for a review, and then in another 10 years we'll need another review, so that's all good. I guess I'm just wondering, just given how much we've learnt from Cyclone Gabriel, whether you're really confident that this plan will go far enough to enable us to be a really spongy city, because we have got major problems coming in this space, obviously.
Yes, well, I suppose the strategic focus 3 is focusing on regenerating the resilience of the city and the role that our open spaces provide, and the important role that the parks provide in being a sponge city. Oh, sorry, is that better?
Thank you.
Should I start again? Oh, I see, yeah. Yeah, through focus 3, it is a focus around resiliency and the important role that open spaces provide in supporting a resilient city and acting as a sponge. But we would be happy to hear through the public consultation how and if we can strengthen this as part of the strategy.
Cool. Thank you. So we've got Councillor Randall, then Free. I will just remind members that we have had 2 workshops and lots of lead-in time for this paper. Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you. So yes, great work, and I'm very supportive of having this sort of strategy review. I just wanted to know, in terms of this consultation, whether there'd be some further information on the open spaces deficiencies, perhaps on a suburb by suburb basis. I'm thinking that Johnsonville, for example, is one of the targeted areas, and also that while we've got this great new facility in Waitohi, the trigger for that was actually a council strategic assessment that the previous Johnsonville Library was a quarter the size that was actually required for the catchment. So I was wanting to know if that sort of detailed information would be available as part of the consultation.
We have that detailed information, and in the GIS maps that will be available, it will show detailed walking provision gap distances from parks. So some of that information will be available, and we could probably make some of our other information available that we're doing in preparation for an investment plan on open space ahead of the LTP. So, yeah.
Yeah, we also have the Community Facilities Network Plan, which is coming back shortly to Council for consideration.
Yes, and one other thing too, I know that part of actually implementing the local stuff is an open spaces review, Johnsonville's had one recently done as a priority project. Can you just explain how much is going to get done under the strategy and how much is actually just a set up to then do the detailed work under specific reviews? Just a little bit, because it didn't really come through. I know it's a very broad document, but it didn't really come through.
Yeah, so this is the sort of high-level strategic direction, and then under Action 1, there is a Develop an Open Space Investment Plan, and that work that we did for Johnsonville last year, we're extending that work out for a bunch of priority areas ahead of that, to develop an open space investment plan ahead of the LTP planning process. And that started now, that work has, yeah.
Okay, no, thank you.
Right, Councillor Free, and then we will move on to debate.
Yeah, just a very quick one. It's good to note in the report that the out of town belts had, it's starting to get more complete. Will we be able to have a report on some of the more recent developments at some point?
Yes, in fact, there's a paper coming up next week on some proposed acquisitions to the Outer Green Belt, and that will give you a bit of context in that paper.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Shona. All right. Thank you, councillors. A huge mahi to the amount of work that your team has been doing on this strategy. I feel very confident and really well informed going into this discussion. Right. Mā wai te mōtini a whaka tā koutou. Is there a mover for the motion? I believe. Oh. Right. We'll go. I think I did say to Councillor Free to move, and then Councillor Wineta to second. Cool with that? All right, Councillor Free.
Thank you. Gosh, it's a pleasure to actually move this report. And I have to really compliment the staff, because I looked at the report and the first thing was it was beautiful, really beautiful. And then I thought it's actually been really well thought through in terms of the 5 priorities. I really can see how it's responding to the way that, the directions that Council's been setting over the last few years, and endorsed again through the discussions and work we've been doing towards our LTP. So I totally love the name, and really think that you've hit the nail on the head with the 5 main emphases. In particular, I won't speak for too long, because I think we can all take the paper as read, but in particular I really like to endorse the point made by Councillor Tenant about the focus on the resilience, the opportunity we've got to use our green spaces as sponges. And, I'm thinking of Kilburnie Park and the skate park there, but also the opportunities to wrap that around with some really great green space that will soak water up. Because we've got lots of places in the city, and colleagues have mentioned Awhero Bay, and they've mentioned Houghton Bay and other places, but we've really got these vulnerable places in the city where we're not going to be able to engineer our way out of some of the issues we're going to face, and really thinking about this in a holistic way and building the water-sensitive urban design into the projects that we're going to bring forward, I think will be really important. I like the way that we've really put it up front and centre, that we're working in partnership with our iwi partners, and the Strathmore Community Centre opening that I went to 2 days ago, I'm still blown away by it, but the architect had worked with mana whenua in a way that transformed the function of that building. And honestly, if you get a chance to go to Strathmore and look at that building, please do, because it's inspirational. It took what would look like a scout hall and a very disconnected lawn, and without actually adding to the footprint of either of those things, has actually managed to make a functional area that will work from the outside into the interior, and then the interior is gorgeous. And to me, it just gave a huge amount of confidence of what we can achieve in this space, not just with our built environment, but with our natural environment, when we're willing to embrace the richness of a partnership. So look, I'm not going to say too much more, because there's a huge amount of information in that report. There's actually a huge amount of evidence that's been presented, and all we're doing today is actually approving it. I think we are receiving the information and agreeing to go to public consultation. I have every confidence the public is going to think this document is as great as I do. So I'll end there.
Thank you, Councillor Free. Councillor Wineta, would you like to speak now?
Yes. Tēnā tātou, kia ora Sarah, thank you for that. I'd also like to begin by offering my thanks to our officers, particularly Ms Hardy, for their work on the strategy and their advice on all the minor amendments there too. The aspiration of a city where our people can explore, they can exercise, relax, play freely amongst our unique natural and built environments is a really noble one, I think, and one that we desire for everyone, regardless of address or regardless of income. The development and growth of our public parks, our coastal areas, and recreation facilities over the next 30 years covered by the strategy is crucial. Responding to the human and also the infrastructure growth of our city, whilst also responding appropriately to the changes yet to be wrought by climate change, are really reflected in the strategy, which gives me great faith in it. Crucial also is recognizing that this city is built on stolen land and actively working towards meaningful redress, and re-indigenization is important going forward. My priorities in supporting and seconding this paper are ensuring that our open and recreational spaces are inclusive and accessible to all, and strongly reflect the values of manaakitanga to our guests on this whenua and users, along with kaitiakitanga for our environment. Recognition specifically of our low-income, rough sleeping and unhoused communities are paramount, and the ways that we build our physical amenities in these spaces is an often ignored way that we can use to make our open spaces welcoming for everyone. Therefore, it's my privilege to second this paper with its minor consequential amendments included under Clause 3 to explicitly protect our communities against hostile architecture and inaccessible public spaces. Nā reira, kia tina tonoa o tāte poti a hei whakamana ai tēnei kaupapa kua ki nei. Tēnā koutou kia ora mai, tātou katoa.
Kia ora, Councillor Wenera. He taka hei tau patu. Is there any further debate? So, yeah, the amendments that were brought forward to officers can be delegated under the, Clause 3, so minor amendments. Yeah. All right, Councillor Pennant.
So we've had excellent speeches from the mover and the seconder, so agree with all of that, and thank you very much to the staff because there's some great thinking in here. So look, all I guess I just really want to say is that it will be interesting to see what the community comes back around resilience, and I chose not to move any amendments today, but certainly there may be some expected when we come back because we have to do really well in this space. I guess the question for us is whether we and future councillors have the ability to fund all the necessary work, and that's where it's going to get really difficult. Like writing these overall strategies in a way is quite a straightforward exercise. It's when it comes to funding and deciding who gets the funding. And obviously my view would be that we do need to spread the funding equitably right throughout the city so that everyone gets some beautiful spaces. But obviously there are also some communities who may need some more. And given the planned intensification, this will become even more important because we're going to get more stormwater with our building plans and climate change, and so we'll need to do this work incredibly well. But I think the team should be proud. It's a great piece of work, and look forward to hearing community feedback.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, with 3 speakers in favour, I will just really encourage our next 2 speakers to keep it to only new points, and I'm sure those worked on the strategy feel well, thanks, so we don't need to go around and thank every single person. All right, Deputy Mayor Fern.
Okay, and to be brief, desperate to thank you, so there, I've done it.
Okay.
But I just want to acknowledge over the weekend the most beautiful things were happening around our public spaces, particularly in reinventing our ideas of what happens spatially. So we had the Fringe Festival, You Are Here at Martin Lucky Park and Berrinpore Golf Course, and it was just incredible to see these parks used in such a different way. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what people come back with that in light. And with that, I do need to mention I am looking forward to hearing new ideas about what we can do with Berrinpore Golf Course. I'm also really keen to hear ideas around, you know, our low carbon tourism, particularly around our amazing tracks and trails and what we've got going on there. So I'm very excited about that. But also we've got challenges with our, where we've had landfills in the past and how we treat that land, and maybe, you know, that's a big opportunity for resilience projects like wetlands and other treatments. So just want to thank you all for the work. This is big mahi. This is why a lot of us are here and what makes living in Wellington awesome. So keen to hear back from Wellingtonians on this work.
Thank you, Councillor Randall.
Okay, thank you. It's great to see that you've got obviously a great base of information on which you can inform the public. I just want to point out that for many people, they have trouble engaging on this information on a citywide basis. Some people are selfish, it seems, and they really only care what happens in their suburb because that's where they live. And so some information on a sort of a suburb by suburb basis, you know, some of the same information you already have, I think would help local residents engage with that, especially deficiency information, you know, where, you know, what is it that their suburb maybe fall short in terms of the objectives of the strategy, and that would, again, understanding that would help them understand where the focus is likely to go towards, or whether they're doing well versus doing poorly within the city. It's all about, as Councillor Tenant said, about equitable investment. But I just note that while you've got the information, I just think that sort of information in a more localised form would be very, very helpful. Thank you.
E te kaunihere Councillor Free e pairangi ana koe ki te whakakoutou kia koe te tikanga. Right of reply, please, Councillor Free.
I don't really think I need one.
Woohoo! Excellent. And Aine ke pōtitia te mōtene. I now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Ko mana, the motion is carried. Alrighty, team. We have the National Hockey Stadium, we've got actions tracking, and then forward work program. I reckon we can get this done by 1 p.m. if we're disciplined with ourselves. So, no mai Kim Fell, ki te hore e te kōrero. Please welcome Kim Fell to introduce the report, and welcome Sarah Murray and, I'm so sorry I don't have your name, Sanjay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this report relates to a request from Wellington Regional Hockey Stadium Trust for grant funding of $38,700 to carry out a feasibility study to inform the future design of the National Hockey Stadium, and that's located in Mount Albert, Newtown. The hockey stadium comprises of 3 turfs and the pavilion buildings. Council owns and maintains the 3 turfs and leases the land and the buildings to the trust. The pavilion is made up of 2 buildings, both of which are very outdated, as we heard this morning, and deemed no longer fit for purpose for a sports venue that caters to all levels of ability. The pavilion has pretty poor accessibility, lack of universal design elements, including gender and neutral facilities, poor natural light, a lack of viewing space, and poor integration with the building surrounds. The Trust is seeking financial support to complete a feasibility study on the needs, options and costs to deliver a fit-for-purpose stadium. The Sportsville Feasibility Fund and the separate Sportsville Partnership Fund were established to support the development of sport facilities, in particular feasibility and design activities. This application by the Trust meets the criteria for funding from these 2 Sportsville funds, namely that the stadium is of a national and regional significance and is able to be used for multiple sport codes. Both the Trust and Wellington Hockey Association have confirmed that they'll contribute to the costs of the feasibility study, and that's expected to be completed by the end of June this calendar year. So I'll take the report as read. We have Sanjay here also to be able to answer any sort of questions that you might have, and Sarah. And thank you, I'll hand it Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, councillors. Are there any partai? Councillor Pennant.
Thanks for the report. We're a hockey family, so very sympathetic. I didn't mean to put the public submitter on the spot, but I was possibly a little bit concerned by his answer. So, I'm fine with giving them the money, but they are going to need more money if they're going to realise it, whatever that the solution is. So, do you think that there will be enough reserves within the hockey community and, from government and in council will need to put something in? Because otherwise we're spending all of the money for 1 year on this feasibility study.
So thank you, councillor. I guess two parts to that question. So these two funds are separate. So this request is from the feasibility part of the fund. We don't have any other proposals in this financial year for that fund. So we're confident and comfortable that this is a good allocation for this financial year for hockey. In answer to the second part of your question and the more substantial part, the model that we have in the city around these type of facilities is a partnering model with sport. So the turfs are a good example of that in terms of how they've been funded and how they're managed. Whilst a decision today doesn't commit the council to any further investment into this, should that be under discussion in the future, we'd certainly be looking to continue that partnering model. I think the availability of funding for sports projects is always a challenging thing for sport and will continue to be so, but this is a significant facility regionally and nationally, and I think we would be looking to put it forward as a significant project for the city to funders.
Right. Is there any further partai? Excellent. Let's move right along. Mā wai te mōtini e whakataka koutou. Is there a mover for the motion? I believe Councillor Abdurrahman is going to move this motion.
Could I move the motion? We reserve my right to speak.
Fantastic. Do you have a seconder for the motion? Would someone like to second? Look,
okay,
it's
good.
fine. He doesn't have to say anything. He just, look.
Okay.
Excellent. Councillor Matthews will second. Is there any debate? Councillor Pennant.
Look, of course I'm going to vote for this. Anything invest in health and fitness will get my support. But I do think there is just a bit of a trickiness around the model where we do give the expectation, essentially by giving them a large chunk of money from the feasibility fund, that we will then continue on with that. And then it just becomes a bit tricky in terms of balancing all the other projects that we might need to fund. So I just potentially from a governance point of view, I get that we can't make a commitment before we've done the feasibility work, but I just think it's a little bit tricky. And so whether this just needs to be some further thought and whether we just kind of go, actually, we're going to partner with you right the way through and we will support you with, appeals to government and to the community sector to help fund. Clearly, it looks like it will be a bit difficult to fund anything by 2024. So, it's probably too late now, isn't it? So, maybe this will be a budget bid for the 2027 one. But I'd just like to have an overall, and I guess we're doing the community facilities review, but just being able to understand what the rates request is going to be, and so that we have got a systematic plan to make sure all these very important facilities are funded well. Kia ora.
Alrighty. Councillor Abdurrahman, would you like a right of reply?
My only thing is I think funding for a feasibility study is one of a good way to do governance and for any potential future funding. So I think we're doing the right thing, and as officers recommended as well, this is the only application that comes through and it's going to the community, the right thing to do. I do support this, and I urge everyone to support it, and in the future maybe I will be talking on every borings like most of other people who've been around, and for now just reserve it for now. Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abdurrahman. E nai nei ka pōtetia te mōtini. I now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Please vote accordingly. Thank you.
make it. Councillor Calvert. Righto. Ko mana, that is carried. Thank you very much, Sanjay, Sarah, Paul, Kim.
Thank you.
Kia ora. All right, we're going to move actions tracking and forward program all together. We can definitely take this report as read. And yeah, I know my Kim Fowl to introduce the report.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if we can take the report as read, the only thing today is obviously we've cleaned up about 10 of the outstanding actions through today's meeting, so that's down to now 20, plus any additional actions from today. So we'll take it as read. Thank you.
Mā wai te mōtini e whakataka koutou. Is there a mover for the motion? Councillor Abdurrahman, would you like to move the motion?
Yep.
Fantastic.
I'm not saying anything again.
Oh, cool. Cool. Councillor McNulty, would you like to second? Fantastic. Is there any debate? Cool. And nainei ka pōtitia te mōtini. I now put the motion which has been moved and seconded. Councillor Calvert. Oh, sorry, no. Ko mana, that is carried. E tēnā kua mutu te hui, e noho mō te karakia. I declare the motion carried, and I will now say the karakia. Enuhia, enuhia, enuhia. Uru tapu nui. Kia wātia, kia māma, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua. E te ara takatū. Koe rā e rongo, whakāria aki ki runga. Kia wātia, aira ko wātia. Woohoo!